I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsors, Viatris and Vertex, for their support. Heather Carmona and I have known each other for a long time, and I honestly cannot recall how many years it's been, but I believe that it's more than a decade. Heather's husband, Scott, has cystic fibrosis, and Scott used to sit on the Bonnell Foundation board of directors. Heather brings more than 25 years experience working throughout the public, private, philanthropic, and nonprofit sector. She's held executive level positions as both Chief Administrative Officer and Executive Director, and is well versed in economic and community development, education, government, social impact, and health and human service organizations. Heather oversees and supports the core branch teams with all aspects of client engagement and service delivery. And if you have a nonprofit or want to learn more about running a nonprofit, this could be the place for you. They have classes and resources along with a free newsletter that anyone can access, and it is also full of local jobs if you're searching for a new nonprofit job. So I'm really excited to feature my friend and amazing woman, Heather Carmona. And Heather, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and for anyone who can't see, who's listening but not watching, I have the craziest, I know it's festive shirt, but anyways, it's just funny to me. So I feel very festive today.
And you have the red glasses, too.
You have the red glasses on, which I love. I was trying to figure out, how long have we known each other? Do you remember? I was thinking like a decade. Is it longer than a decade?
I always do things and gauging if it was before I had my child or after. Yeah. So my daughter's 15, so it was well before Hope. I think we're probably going closer to 20.
Yeah, that is great. And so I said in the introduction that you're married to Scott, who has cystic fibrosis. So if we can start by updating, whatever you want to share about how he's doing.
He's doing great. He's really doing great. I think the trajectory of CF with him, he's definitely a case study for the advancements and living a healthy, productive life with cystic fibrosis, which is great. So he's doing really well. He is on Trikafta. He may be looking at another med down the road, but overall, his quality of life, I would say, is not much different than somebody who doesn't have cystic fibrosis. So looking forward, he's late 50s, which is great, and things are good. Yeah, he's doing great. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And he is so involved in the CF community. And like I said, he was on the Bonnell Foundation board, so it's wonderful. All his involvement and the work he's done is very appreciated by all of us. And then tell us about Hope, because the majority of men with cystic fibrosis, because the vas deferens is not connected, can't have kids. And then you had this beautiful surprise and had your daughter.
Yeah. Come to find out that wasn't something related to CF at all. It wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a 15-year-old daughter, Hope, and she does not have CF. She's a carrier, but we're enjoying life with a high school sophomore and everything that comes along with that, basketball and plays. So we have just a typical life with a teenager. Driver's training and lots of different interests there. So very blessed. Yes.
All the fun stuff. Well, thank you. And glad to see your puppy on your lap.
Yes.
too.
This is
Very
actually my real baby now.
Right. I get
Yeah.
it. I know. My cat should
Yeah.
wander in at some point. I'm glad that we're talking. Work for and are part of a big part of the nonprofit spot. And I actually just got my newsletter just earlier today. I, have seen all that you've done, and I took classes before through the nonprofit spot. And your resources and everything have grown so much. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I have to have Heather on the podcast because there are so many people that either need more information in the nonprofit space or maybe are thinking about heading into the nonprofit world. And this would be great information for us. So you're in Florida, Detroit, and Grand Rapids. So why don't you tell us, what you do?
Like many people right out of college, I went and worked for, started my career. And early on, I think in my career, well, I'll just say I started working for a nonprofit organization. And I thought at the time, it was an experience. It was a skill. I was doing communications for a nonprofit, but I never really thought that it would be a career where I ended up spending 30 years professionally working with various organizations. So my background really is at the community level, and I think for many people who don't really know, a nonprofit really fills a void. It's something that, government or business is not doing. So people oftentimes create nonprofits because they see a void or they want to help a constituency or a select audience and provide support. But at the nonprofit spot, so my partner and I have a partner. We started the nonprofit spot close to 10 years ago now. I can't believe it because those years of the pandemic kind of blurred together. And really our focus was to help people and organizations. So people who have an idea, often say, I'm going to start an organization because I have a child, right, who has a need, or I see a need in my community, or I want to help veterans or senior, whatever. What they often don't plan for is, helping to raise money and do the work, right? So you have a passion, you have a skill set, like you, Laura, you have an avenue through the foundation where you're very strong and skilled, but, at any given time, you need people to help support you. And so I won't get into statistics, but the majority of nonprofits, particularly in Michigan, are nonprofits that have budgets well under $1 million. Some of those have budgets under $500,000, which people think, oh, that's a lot of money. But when you are looking at, running programs or, coordinating, the work that you want to do, that goes very quickly. So where we really hang our hat, or what we call our sweet spot in the nonprofit spot, is working with small to emerging, we say mid-sized to emerging nonprofits. So organizations that have started off, may for a few years been kind of going about their business and realize they're kind of at that tipping point. They either want to grow or they don't really know what they need. Maybe they want to start seeking grants, but they don't, do I need a grant writer? No, you don't need a grant writer. You just need somebody to help you kind of start exploring grants, right?
And I just have to say, as you're talking about grants, I just was looking at the note that I wrote. Ask Heather about grant writers. I mean, because we can write some of the grants. We need help with other grants. We've had so many interesting grant writers. We've had success with grant writers. Anyways, we could talk for days about grant writing.
Yeah, and if we just use that as an example, so our firm does a lot of different things related to fundraising and governance. So I'll leave it at that's kind of the broad stroke of where our focus is. So, we realize that most organizations need help with money. That's the number one thing people come to us for. Like, I want to fundraise, or I don't have a very active board, that sort of a thing. So we kind of have joined the two as being really the areas of concentration that our team focuses on, like our expertise, I guess you should say. But yeah, to use grant writing, I think that's a really good example, Laura, because, it really varies. It starts with understanding where there's opportunities for your organization. So if you're working in a certain space, and you can use the Bonnell Foundation, there are private grants, there are, corporation grants, there's public funding, there's foundation, all sorts of different opportunities that the Bonnell Foundation may qualify for. It's a strategy. You just don't all of a sudden start kind of applying for things. You start kind of working through, well, number one, if we're aware of opportunities, you mentioned our newsletter. We found out very early that if we just put resources out into the community, let people know it's available, and then they can say, oh, I think we might qualify for that XYZ grant. But you know what? I don't have anybody that can help me do that. They'll come to us and say, can you help us write this grant? And, we'll determine exactly how long that takes. Sometimes it can be a one-off opportunity where we're just seeking one grant, or it might be that we're looking at building what we would call a pipeline, just like in the drugs, right? The drug pipeline. We have grant pipelines. Building a robust pipeline because it's about shots on goal. So that $1 million grant that you think you're really going to get because chances are you may not get that. But what other grants are in the pipeline that allow you to be successful? So that's an example of things that we can do for clients. And, we have clients that have dozens of grants in the pipeline or hundreds, and we have clients where they're just sort of, going quarter by quarter. If they apply for one grant per quarter, that's the speed in which they're able to do their work, So it really depends.
Yeah, ask and say, I've learned, and this is really how the foundation has gone. It's just by a process of learning, oh, that's how they do it. I learned and I was so lucky to have a mentor in the beginning from Gilda's Club in Royal Oak. I had a great mentor there, and she was fabulous, kind of guiding me and telling me what to do. And I encourage everyone to get mentors because they're wonderful. And they obviously know so much more than I did at the time. But I have since found out that, wow, you could get a grant writer that wants a percentage of your grant. You can get a grant writer that wants to be paid hourly. You can get a grant writer. I mean, there's so many different things. And that's something to figure out too, how you want to pay them.
Yeah, and I think that's we've always said we meet people and organizations where they are. So it's one common question we're asked is, what is your ongoing rate? How much do you charge to write a grant? And I can't answer that because I don't know if it's a simple application and you have some supporting materials for your programs. It may just be a few hours. If it's a federal grant application, that could take a long time. That could take several months, depending on. So, we really try to listen. I think that's the first thing, is have conversations with our prospective clients or just people in the community. And sometimes they're not ready. It's just preparing them and providing resources, as you said, Laura, as to other opportunities that may be available to them. I will say the one thing, and this is, I think, for anybody in any field they're in, is collaboration is key. There's a tendency, I think, especially when you're passionate about something, right, that I'm going to go start this and do it on my own and be, but I think what you'll find is that there's people that not only share your passion and your drive, but it's, putting yourself in the right place where people of like minds are with you and different, where you can collaborate and maybe be stronger together. And that's very important, particularly I think for a lot of startup nonprofits, is you have to look for those opportunities to collaborate. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to mean losing control, but it means that there's the potential to grow and maybe be more effective. And funders like to see that too, right? They want to see their, cooperation as well.
Yeah, that I really liked was when I went to the class that you had, the nonprofit spot, about boards. Boards can be complicated. They're wonderful, but you really have to learn so much on how to get certain things out of your board members and how to know, what they can do. So if you want to talk about some of the classes that you offer, the different classes that can help nonprofits.
Sure. I would say probably our tried and true kind of standard is we do an introductory to serving on a nonprofit board, like 101, board 101. And we gear it in a couple different ways. We can structure it for an organization that is looking to attract board members. What are some of the caveats? What are some of the qualifications? What should board members expect if they're on a board? But then we also structure in a way that, depending on the organization, maybe they're a board who's seen a lot of attrition, or they have a board that's kind of, they have people that come to meetings, but they're not really a working board, or, so we really structure that training in a lot of different ways to customize it to the organization. So that's kind of the framing is, what are the responsibilities of being on a board too? So from a compliance standpoint, that really never changes. And then we can gear it either way. So that's a starting point. We do finance trainings around how to read a balance sheet or statement. And that's a common one. People say, oh, I have a board member, or my board is great, but they don't want to fundraise, or they don't really know what questions to ask. It's really important as a board member to realize you're responsible for the financial position of that organization. It's a big obligation, but it doesn't mean that you have to be a CPA, right? It just means that you kind of have to understand what to look for, And it's as simple as, if you're spending more than you're taking in, then that's a sign right there too. The idea that nonprofits have to always break even, that's a myth. That I think your operating budget should balance your expenses and your revenue, but that does not mean that you can't, have reserves and have an endowment and, build capacity for your organization. So again, we have a lot of kind of spin-off type classes. I would say those are the two core, a financial one and really the board development.
Do you think those are the two biggest challenges? Is that what you're saying when starting?
Yes, everything spins off of that. It's really governance and funding. Yeah, exactly.
How do you see people doing once they've come to your classes or connected with you to find out more as far as either their personal growth or their growth? I mean, does it matter? I would think it would matter if they're listening and responding to the information that you're giving.
Yeah, they're all in person. We're back to doing these in person. We did them over the COVID via Zoom, and it was challenging. Part of what they're intended to be is an opportunity to, while we don't get into the specifics of every organization, at any given training, the broader ones, we may have people from all types of organizations participating. I think when you were in it too, we had people who don't remember exactly who was there, but there are people with different representing different organizations or different skills, and so we do try to provide an opportunity for people to participate and ask questions. So when we give examples, I think it's helpful when people can see themselves in what you're saying, right? You're not talking at people, you're actually using examples. So we will often use examples of clients. We won't say who, but say we have a client that is so that people can kind of understand and make it more applicable to them. I think a point I kind of want to circle back on, which I think is, you mentioned about the board, is, I think as I tell people not to over-govern themselves. As much as you have to have strong governance and leadership, what we often see is people feeling like they have to have a certain number of board members, or I have to do this before I can do this, and a lot of times it's not a linear path. I mean, that's life itself, right? You're going to kind of go. So I especially tell, I think, smaller organizations is, here are some of the basic things you need, but you don't have to wait to get X before you do this. And, there's going to be mistakes along the way, but, yeah, I think again, like life, if you start, you learn, and you kind of try to adapt to, and start small. So the commitment on doing a board training is very low entry. So we start with those things where we can start educating organizations before they feel like they have to go all in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is so true. And I also found that even in advocacy, and in parenting or being newly diagnosed with CF, people who have less experience than me as a parent or a nonprofit, they also have much to offer. I have learned things from people with less experience because they do things differently. So it's always good to ask people how they're doing, or when they're asking me questions, I always want to know how they're doing it, because they may have come up with this great idea, but somebody with more experience thinks, oh, we've been doing it this way for so long. I know how, I know what we're doing. But I always find out in talking to someone who has less experience that they have some great idea or they're doing something differently. So having those conversations and getting into groups like at the Nonprofit Spotter classes, it's really helpful, because you find somebody with more experience that can say, oh my gosh, we did that. It was horrible, bad decision by us. Or you find somebody with less experience who will say, oh, I didn't even know I was supposed to do something a certain way. We did it this way and it worked. So it's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it goes back to, like, I mean, as a communicator, it's about communication and collaboration. It really is. We can get into our silos and into our, and it's not by sake of intent. It's just, people who are very focused on their work too. You can kind of get head down, right? And not really lift your head up, and an opportunity to kind of say, oh, well, maybe this is a chance to kind of look at things from a new lens or a different perspective. Mm. Yeah. It's hard to do with small organizations. It really is. It's very hard.
What about the fundraising aspect? What do you do for that? Because I would have to say that I find that to be the hardest thing. It's a constant, 365 days a year, 24/7, making sure that you're in touch with your donors and all your sponsors constantly, and then you have ebbs and flows on their end. It might be a good financial year for them or a bad financial year. So your whole fundraising and your whole budget, everything relies on how you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so really, as I stated, really our organization can't be effective unless it can raise money to do what it needs to do, right? I think every organization has a tendency, and I've seen it because when I was an executive director, like, you want that big grant, or you've got that one guy that gives you that big chunk of money every year, and you're like, oh, good, we've got that. We can kind of take a breather here. But I think what's interesting and what I've noticed over my career, and just how, again, things kind of ebbs and flows, is our approach to fundraising is, it's not a zero-sum game, that you can do it's a kind of a combination of strategy and tactics, we like to say. So you can work a plan. It's important to work a plan and have vision, know where you want to go. But I would tell people, particularly, smaller organizations or people just starting out, that, there's opportunity. The tactical pieces you can begin to employ too. So, for example, the way we would approach an organization, a young organization that says, I need to raise money, is we would start by really just exploring what their goals, what their needs are, and kind of looking at their footprint as an organization. Do they have individual donors? Do they have some major people who are giving them larger gifts? Have they been successful or received grants? To sort of understand the mix, right? And then we can start to, develop a strategy around where there are more opportunities, or where they can build upon some strengths. So, for example, if they have a couple major people who give them, larger gifts each year, maybe they'd be better off putting their energy in an individual giving strategy versus a grant program, right? So it really depends on the organization. And then that way it allows the organization to deploy some, as I said, some near-term tactical things, while also potentially looking at a strategy. So, that's effective for organizations that don't have a lot of staff or support. And that's where we help. We help you do that work. So, if you had a year, and, Giving Tuesday was just a couple weeks ago, right? We hear from clients saying, oh, I want to do Giving Tuesday. And one of the first questions we ask is, how do you collect that money? Where's it going to go, right? Like, when it comes into your database, who is sending the thank you letters? Oh, because you think about, we want to get all that, But from an infrastructure standpoint, they might not think about, oh, we're going to have to write thank you. So how do you capture those donors for the next gift? So, so yeah, it all depends on the organization, but we really start with what we call an exploratory call to really understand and then kind of go from there.
And I think too, it's also if you're thinking about a new program, who's going to run that program?
Yes, absolutely. That's a big thing. That people go, oh, I have an idea to do this. Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, exactly. Staff.
Right.
For sure.
Are you going to take charge of it? Yeah. Yeah. We have so many great ideas. We could have, I don't know, 50 more programs, but it is like,
Totally.
okay, who's going to run those programs and how is it going to be successful? Because you want it to be successful and you want it to grow and you want to learn from it. But if you don't have the people to volunteer or support it.
Right. And more importantly, going back to your question about fundraising, who cares about those programs and who is inclined to want to support those, right? Who could benefit and who's on the other end of those that could benefit and see value in supporting you and executing those programs,
Yeah, it's exactly that, because with our funders, we know what they love. We know the programs they love, and education is huge. So the podcasts are a big hit for our donors, along with other programs, obviously, but because this is education and it's getting the word out and it's helping people. So it's really important for us to keep doing these podcasts for those reasons. But yeah, it's very interesting. And then you do operations and management support as well, correct?
We do. I had mentioned that the bulk of our clients are kind of small to mid-size or emerging organizations. Part of the analysis of an organization is, do they need something on a project basis, or are they really looking at filling a void within their organization? So an example of that might be, I'll go back to kind of the Giving Tuesday again. Maybe they just need somebody to work for the month of January, or just in fulfilling, those pledges, or getting the database set up, or sending out the thank yous. And that could be a project-based piece of work that we can say, we think it will take this amount of hours. This is our fee. So a lot of times an organization, particularly that doesn't have a big budget, that's more palatable to them, because they can say, okay, I know that there's a beginning point and an end point, and this is what I'm getting for my money, right? And then we're handing off whatever that work is. We do have a pretty good chunk of business that it's ongoing. So it's like a month to month, where we are actually serving as like the development department, for lack of a better word, for a nonprofit organization. But it doesn't necessarily have to be fundraising. So you'd mentioned, like, sometimes it's administrative, sometimes it's a little bit of finance related work. They may need us to redevelop their policies and procedures manual, or, whatever. So it really varies. And depending on the organization, sometimes we're doing that on a month-to-month basis for an indefinite period of time. They've created a budget and said, rather than hire a full-time employee, we're going to contract out to the nonprofit spot to provide X amount of hours per month for this fee. And then we have kind of an ongoing scope of work with various tasks that we will execute on a monthly basis. So again, it's very, responsive, I think, to the needs of the organizations in what they need. And I think this is the biggest thing that I always like to share, is that our contracting team, while they're all independent contractors, we have several members of our team that kind of float around with various clients. And we don't make any of our contractors or our clients sign long-term contracts. And when I mean long-term contracts, what I mean is, if a client comes to us, or prospective organization, and says, oh, I'm really interested in, maybe developing a little fundraising strategy, or, we'll determine the duration of that. But at any given time, even if it's monthly work, the client could come to us and say, you know what, we don't want to continue. So I think for a lot of small organizations, oftentimes, and I know because I was in that boat, it's making that jump, right? Like, I don't want to hire a consultant because, oh boy, I don't know how long, or maybe our funding's going to change, or our board chair is retiring next year. I'm not sure what And it goes back to not waiting for things or not feeling like you have to commit and be so far out. We can really look at things as you need them. And that's, again, more palatable, I think, to a lot of smaller organizations. So,
And I would say one thing that I think is up in the top 3 would be marketing and communications. We've gone through a number of people, and it's always something that you're looking for because it's really important to get the word out about what you're doing.
yeah, and that's an area, when we look at our work, we pull in the people that we have expertise in different areas. Like for example, that is not my strength. I'm not the best, probably. When it comes to PR and marketing and all of that, I will defer to people who have better skills in that area, right? So that's what makes our team strong too. Is we all bring different resources to the table. Or if we have a project and somebody approaches me on that, I'll say, I think I have somebody that can do that, maybe a little better than either of my. So that's again where we pull the right expertise in. We have contractors that are working 20 hours a week, and we have contractors that are working 20 hours a month. So that's really where we try to fit that puzzle, is making sure we have the right fit, not only in skill but also in the level of commitment that they want to make to their time in an organization.
And I know it's so much work, but don't you love working for yourself? I love working for myself. I mean, it is such a huge commitment, but wow, it's phenomenal.
I do. Yeah, I think, it's allowed. There's pros and cons for sure. Yeah, but I would say you become, accustomed to it. I think you touched on that a little. So, it's funny. Before COVID, our model is really virtual. That's another important thing too, is a lot of people say, well, fundraising is so relationship driven. How can you raise funds with, and that is really true. But I think most of the work that we're doing, and I think, again, knowing different avenues through social media and peer-to-peer, there are so many different ways now people are connecting with one another. But, that's where we have found success too, is that our model is you don't have to have somebody, in a chair in the office in the same place every day to be effective, But I do like, it allows me some autonomy, allows me to bring my little doggy here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Added benefits. And, I think the other thing too is about the nonprofit spot. Let's say no one listening to this wants to start their own nonprofit, but they're looking for a job. You have a fabulous list of job openings, mainly in Metro Detroit, though. Is that correct? Or is it also Florida and Grand Rapids, or everywhere?
Thank you for mentioning that. We do a weekly newsletter where we do curate opportunities throughout the nonprofit sector. We do have 2 different editions. We have one for Michigan, and I would say that the focus of that is really Lower Michigan. We do have clients and a small team in Grand Rapids, but we've sort of centralized the Michigan newsletter. Nothing in the UP, I hate to say, but I mean, probably up towards North Lansing and then across. So we're really slicing the state from here down. So core employment areas, for lack of a better word, where we list jobs. And then, yes, we have a separate edition for Florida as a different market. Yep. So, and people subscribe to whatever edition they want.
And it is a free newsletter. And how can people subscribe?
It is a free newsletter. So our free Nonprofit Spot news comes out once a week. It's on Tuesday mornings. And you can go to our website, nonprofitspot.com. And if it's your first time to our website, you'll get the pop-up that has you, put your email in. We do offer a paid edition specifically for grants. So the weekly edition, as you mentioned, Laura, is really focused on its funding and jobs. We have found is most people wanted they want jobs and funding, right? And some educational, we'll do some webinars or things like that we see that are out there in the field. But our focus was really on the funding and the people, resources. And so a paid edition of our newsletter provides more detail into grants. So we will curate, and that's a bi-monthly, twice a month, for $19 a month. And you get a lot more funding opportunities there. So that's for organizations that, frankly, may not want to pay for somebody to do research, but just want to see what the potential is there. So that's a great value add, a great, I think, resource as well, and that one's very affordable. And that's on when you sign up for our regular newsletter, you can get the information on that other newsletter.
Okay. And it's in our show notes too, so people can just click on it. But I also love about your newsletter is that it's very simple. I know exactly where to look, and it's a great read. Sometimes I get newsletters and they're overwhelming, and I just think, oh my gosh, I need a week to go through that newsletter.
I appreciate that. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, it's very highly read. We have a great response rate on it, because just for that reason. It's short and sweet. You kind of can go through. Some of the stuff is repetitive, we'll carry stuff for a couple months and think, okay, people are tired of seeing this, then change it up. Yeah.
Well, was there anything that I forgot to ask you about in regards to the nonprofit spot that you wanted to mention?
I think we want to be a resource in the community. And I would say that if anyone, if somebody's looking for an opportunity, if they're looking for, ways that they can either, work within, the nonprofit sector, please feel free to reach out to me. And or if you have an organization or maybe you volunteer with an organization that may have some needs, we'd love to always be considered. But I think it just starts with a conversation. So please feel free, my email, to email me with any questions, needs, or thoughts, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody at any time. So thank you. I appreciate this, Laura. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I know we could talk longer for sure, but no, I appreciate all you're doing and all your expertise that you've shared with me over the years and will continue to. But yeah, it's a great organization you have. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for your leadership, because it's, obviously it's impactful to families. We've been the recipient and beneficial of your advocacy too. So thank you for keeping the torch alive and keeping CF community engaged.
Thank you.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know what's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical, The Science of Possibility, and Viatris. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.